A little girl named Chloe offers her peanut butter and jelly sandwich to a struggling man named Thomas, showing him kindness in a moment when he needed it most. What Chloe doesn't realize is that her small act of compassion will set off a chain of events far greater than anything she could have imagined. So, how does Chloe's simple gesture transform not just one life, but an entire community, and what incredible ripple effect does it create? Stick around to find out, and before we dive into this heartwarming story, let us know where you're watching from today. If you enjoy tales like this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Let's get started. The city bustled with its usual chaos, cars honking, people weaving through crowded sidewalks, and the constant hum of life echoing between towering skyscrapers. Nestled amidst all this noise was a small neighborhood park, a rare pocket of tranquility. It was here that 8-year-old Chloe often found her slice of peace after school. Chloe, with her dark, bouncy curls and wide, curious eyes, skipped along the familiar path that led to the playground. Her backpack, almost too big for her small frame, jiggled with every hop. The sun was warm on her back, and her infectious smile lit up her face. For Chloe, the park was a magical place. The patches of green grass, the colorful playground equipment, and the comforting shade of the old oak tree made her feel free and happy. She'd always loved the park, but today something caught her eye that made her pause. Sitting alone on a worn wooden bench near the swings was a man she hadn't seen before. His clothes were old and frayed, his shoes scuffed and barely holding together. A scruffy beard framed his tired face, and his gaze was fixed on the ground, as though the weight of the world rested on his hunched shoulders. Chloe slowed her skipping, her small feet dragging slightly as she stared. She noticed the faint rise and fall of the man's chest, the way his hands fidgeted restlessly in his lap. His eyes, though cast downward, looked as if they held stories too heavy to tell. She felt something stir inside her, a mixture of curiosity and concern. Chloe wasn't sure what to do at first, but then she heard it, the soft growl of his stomach breaking the quiet around him. Without thinking, Chloe stopped, swung her backpack off her shoulders, and rummaged through it. She pulled out a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, neatly wrapped in wax paper, the one her dad Marcus had packed for her after-school snack. It was her favorite, and she had been looking forward to eating it all day. But as she glanced at the man again, sitting there so still, her mind was made up. Clutching the sandwich, Chloe took a deep breath and approached the bench. Her little sneakers made soft scuffing sounds on the path, and for the first time the man looked up. His eyes, a striking blue dulled by exhaustion, met hers. For a moment neither spoke. Chloe hesitated, her small frame almost dwarfed by his presence, but she found her courage. "Hi, sir," she said softly, her voice just loud enough to carry over the rustling leaves. "Are you hungry?" The man blinked, as if unsure he had heard her correctly. He looked at the sandwich in her outstretched hand and then back at her face. His lips parted to speak, but no words came out at first. Finally he said, I suppose I am." Chloe smiled, her dimples showing. "It's peanut butter and jelly, my favorite. You can have it if you want." The man hesitated, his rough hands hovering over the sandwich as though he didn't quite believe it was being offered to him. "You don't have to do this," he murmured, his voice hoarse and low. "It's okay," Chloe said with a small shrug. "My dad always says that when someone's in need it's nice to help, and you look like you need it more than I do." A flicker of emotion passed across the man's face, something between gratitude and disbelief. Slowly he reached out and took the sandwich, his hands trembling slightly. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick. "You don't know how much this means to me." Chloe tilted her head, studying him with the unfiltered honesty only a child could have. "What's your name?" The man hesitated again before answering. "Thomas." "I'm Chloe," she said brightly, her smile widening. She hesitated, then asked, "Why are you here all alone?" Thomas took a small bite of the sandwich, savoring it as though it was the first meal he'd had in days. He chewed thoughtfully before answering. "Sometimes life doesn't go the way we plan," he said simply, his voice tinged with sadness. Chloe nodded, her young mind trying to understand his words. "Well, I'm glad you're here today," she said, "and I hope things get better for you." Thomas looked at her, his tired eyes softening. "You're a kind soul, Chloe. Don't ever lose that. She sat on the edge of the bench, her legs swinging as they dangled above the ground. For a while, they sat in companionable silence, Thomas eating his sandwich and Chloe watching the other children play on the swings. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Chloe knew it was time to head home. "I have to go now," she said, standing up. "Will you be okay, Thomas?" He nodded, his eyes glistening. "Thanks to you, I'm better than I've been in a long time." Chloe waved goodbye, her curls bouncing as she skipped away, the lightness in her step reflecting the warmth in her heart. She couldn't wait to tell her dad about her new friend and the small moment of kindness that made her feel like she'd done something important. Little did Chloe know, that single sandwich and her big heart would set off a chain of events no one could have predicted. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the city streets as Chloe bounded into their small apartment. Her dark curls bounced with every step, and her cheeks were rosy from the cool evening air. She burst through the door, her excitement filling the room like a gust of fresh wind. "Dad! Dad! You won't believe what happened today!" Chloe exclaimed, dropping her backpack by the door and running to the small kitchen where her father, Marcus, was finishing up dinner. Marcus turned from the stove, his broad shoulders hunched slightly from a long day at work. His face, though tired, lit up at the sight of his daughter's enthusiasm. "What's got you so excited, Chloe?" he asked, wiping his hands on a dish towel. Chloe climbed onto a chair at the kitchen table, her legs swinging as she began recounting her story. "There was this man in the park," she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. "He was sitting all alone on the bench and he looked so sad. I gave him my sandwich, Dad, the one you packed for me." Marcus froze mid-motion, his brow furrowing. "You gave your sandwich to a stranger?" he asked, his voice calm but tinged with concern. Chloe nodded eagerly. "Yes, his name is Thomas, and he was really hungry. He said I made him feel better." Marcus sat down across from Chloe, his tired eyes softening as he looked at her. "That was a kind thing to do, Chloe," he said gently. "But you know we've talked about being careful around strangers, right?" Chloe's bright expression faltered slightly, her excitement giving way to uncertainty. "I know, Dad," she said, her voice quieter now. "But he didn't seem scary. He was just sad." Marcus reached across the table and took her small hand in his. "I know your heart is in the right place, sweetheart. You have such a big heart, and I'm so proud of you for wanting to help. But not everyone out there has good intentions." Chloe's brows knitted together as she listened. "But Dad," she said earnestly, "he didn't do anything bad. He was just hungry. I thought you'd be proud of me." Marcus felt his chest tighten at her words. He sighed, squeezing her hand gently. "Chloe, I am proud of you. More than you know. What you did was incredibly kind. But it's my job to keep you safe, and sometimes that means being a little cautious, even when someone seems nice." Chloe nodded slowly, her young mind processing his words. "I understand," she said softly, "but I just felt like he needed it more than I did." Marcus smiled, his heart swelling with pride and a touch of worry. "That's what makes you so special, Chloe. You see people for who they are, and you're not afraid to help. That's something the world needs more of." Chloe's face brightened at his words, her earlier hesitation melting away. "Thanks, Dad," she said, a shy smile creeping across her face. "I just wanted to make him happy." "You did, Chloe. I'm sure you made his whole day," Marcus said, standing up to return to the stove. He stirred the pot of spaghetti sauce, the aroma filling the small apartment. "Now, how about we eat dinner and you can tell me more about Thomas?" Chloe nodded enthusiastically, hopping off her chair to help set the table. As they ate, she shared every detail of her encounter, the way Thomas's eyes lit up when she offered the sandwich, how he told her not to lose her kindness, and how it made her feel like she had done something important. Marcus listened intently, nodding and asking questions, but inside his mind raced. He couldn't help but feel a mixture of emotions: pride in his daughter's big heart, worry about her safety, and curiosity about the man she had helped. Who was Thomas? What had brought him to that park? And was Chloe's kindness just a small moment in his life, or could it lead to something more? Later that night, as Marcus tucked Chloe into bed, he sat on the edge of her mattress, stroking her curls. "Chloe," he said softly, "you have such a gift. You see the good in people, even when they're struggling. That's a beautiful thing. But I want you to promise me something." Chloe blinked up at him sleepily. "What is it, Dad?" "If you ever see someone who needs help, come tell me first, okay? We can figure out the best way to help them together." Chloe nodded solemnly. "I promise, Dad." Marcus leaned down and kissed her forehead. "That's my girl. Now get some sleep." As Chloe drifted off, Marcus sat for a moment, watching her peaceful face. He couldn't shake the feeling that this small act of kindness was more significant than either of them realized. It was as though Chloe had planted a tiny seed in the world, and Marcus wondered what it might grow into. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, and sunlight poured through the windows of Marcus and Chloe's small apartment. The scent of freshly brewed coffee lingered in the air as Marcus stood in the kitchen, tidying up after breakfast. Chloe sat cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by colored pencils and a half-finished drawing of the park she loved so much. "Dad, do you think I could bring extra sandwiches to the park next time?" Chloe asked, her voice full of hope. "Maybe someone else might need one too." Marcus smiled at her from the kitchen. "We'll see, Chloe. It's a good idea, but we'll talk about it later, okay?" Chloe nodded, satisfied for the moment, and returned to her drawing, humming a tune to herself. Suddenly, a sharp knock echoed through the apartment, breaking the quiet. Marcus frowned, glancing toward the door. Visitors weren't common for them, and he hadn't been expecting anyone. "Chloe, stay here," he said, wiping his hands on a dish towel as he walked toward the door. Chloe froze mid-hum, her pencil poised above the page. "Who is it, Dad?" she asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. "I'm not sure, sweetie," Marcus replied, peeking through the peephole. Standing in the hallway were two uniformed police officers. Marcus's heart skipped a beat, and his protective instincts flared. He opened the door cautiously. "Good afternoon, sir," one of the officers said, a tall man with kind eyes and a calm demeanor. "I'm Officer Walker, and this is my partner, Officer Hernandez. Are you Marcus Lewis?" Marcus nodded, his throat tightening. "Yes, I am. Is something wrong?" The officers exchanged a glance before Officer Walker continued. "We're here to ask you and your daughter a few questions about an encounter she had in the park a few days ago. May we come in?" Marcus hesitated for a moment but then stepped aside, gesturing for them to enter. "Of course," he said, his voice steady. "Chloe," he called gently, "come here, please." Chloe appeared in the doorway of the living room, her wide eyes darting between the officers and her father. She clutched a red pencil in one hand, her expression a mix of curiosity and nervousness. "Hi," she said softly, her small voice filling the quiet room. Officer Hernandez knelt down to Chloe's level, a warm smile on her face. "Hi, Chloe. Don't worry. You're not in any trouble. We just want to ask you a few questions about a man you met in the park. Do you remember him?" Chloe's eyes lit up. "You mean Thomas?" she asked, her voice brightening. The officers nodded, and Officer Walker pulled out a small notebook. "Yes, that's right. Can you tell us about him? What happened when you met him?" Chloe glanced at Marcus, who gave her a reassuring nod. She stepped closer to the officers, clutching her pencil tightly as she began to speak. "He was sitting on the bench and he looked really sad and hungry, so I gave him my sandwich. He said it made him feel better." Officer Hernandez's smile widened. "That was a very kind thing to do, Chloe. Did Thomas tell you anything else? Maybe where he was from or where he was going?" Chloe furrowed her brow, thinking hard. "Not really," she said after a moment. "He just said that sometimes life doesn't go the way we plan." The officers exchanged another look, and Marcus couldn't hold back any longer. "What's this about?" he asked, his voice firm but controlled. "Why are you asking Chloe about Thomas?" Officer Walker sighed, tucking his notebook away. "Mr. Lewis, the man your daughter met in the park, Thomas, was found unconscious later that evening. He's in the hospital now, recovering." Marcus felt his chest tighten. "Is he okay?" "He's stable," Officer Hernandez said gently. "But here's the interesting part. When he regained consciousness, he started talking about Chloe and the sandwich she gave him. He said it was the first time in a long time that someone showed him kindness. Chloe's eyes widened and she gripped Marcus's hand. "Is he going to be okay?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. The officers nodded. "Yes, Chloe," Officer Walker said. "But there's more. Thomas has started to remember things about his life. We've learned that his real name is Jonathan Gray, and he's been missing for over a year." Marcus's jaw dropped. "Missing? What do you mean?" Officer Hernandez explained. "Jonathan Gray is, or was, a successful architect in New York. He disappeared after suffering a traumatic accident, and his family has been searching for him ever since. It seems your daughter's kindness helped trigger something in his memory." Marcus looked down at Chloe, who was staring at the officers with wide, unblinking eyes. "I helped him remember?" she whispered. "You did, Chloe," Officer Hernandez said, smiling. "Your small act of kindness made a big difference." Marcus felt a swell of pride and awe as he looked at his daughter. "What happens now?" he asked the officers. "The Gray family has been notified," Officer Walker replied. "They're overwhelmed with gratitude. They'd like to meet you and Chloe, if you're willing." Chloe's face lit up. "We can meet his family?" she asked, practically bouncing on her toes. Marcus hesitated, his protective instincts kicking in. "We'll think about it," he said carefully. The officers stood, sensing the conversation had reached its natural conclusion. "Take your time," Officer Walker said, handing Marcus a business card. "Here's how you can reach us if you have any questions. Thank you for your time, and thank you, Chloe, for your kindness. It truly made a difference." As the officers left, Marcus closed the door and turned to Chloe, who was still clutching her red pencil. She looked up at him, her eyes shining. "Dad, I helped him," she said, her voice filled with wonder. Marcus knelt down and pulled her into a hug. "You did, sweetheart," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You made a bigger difference than you'll ever know." But even as pride swelled in his chest, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something far greater than either of them could have imagined. The next day dawned quiet and calm, but Marcus's thoughts were far from still. As he poured his morning coffee, he replayed the officer's words in his head. Jonathan Gray, a missing architect, found because of Chloe's kindness. Chloe, oblivious to her father's worries, sat at the kitchen table, drawing a new picture. She was sketching the park again, but this time, she added a small figure on a bench. "Do you think Thomas remembers me now, Dad?" she asked, looking up from her drawing. "I think he remembers you very well, Chloe," Marcus replied, setting his mug down. "And I think he'll never forget what you did for him." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of Marcus's phone buzzing on the counter. He picked it up, his brow furrowing as he saw an unfamiliar number. Hesitating for a moment, he answered. "Hello? Mr. Lewis?" a warm voice said on the other end. "This is Catherine Gray. I believe the officers spoke to you about my son, Jonathan." Marcus straightened up, his grip tightening on the phone. "Yes, they did. How is he doing?" Catherine's voice wavered slightly, a mix of relief and emotion. "He's stable, and he's starting to recover his memory. I can't thank you enough for what your daughter did. Jonathan told us about her, about how her kindness helped him remember who he is." Marcus glanced at Chloe, who was now watching him curiously. "We're just glad he's okay," Marcus said cautiously. "Jonathan would like to meet you and Chloe," Catherine continued. "He's been asking about her, and our family would love the chance to thank you both in person. If it's too much, we understand, but—" Her voice broke, and she quickly collected herself. "You've given us our son back. We'll never be able to repay you for that." Marcus hesitated, his protective instincts flaring once more. But then he looked at Chloe, her innocent face full of curiosity and hope. He sighed. "We'd be happy to meet you. Just let us know when and where." 2 days later, Marcus and Chloe found themselves standing outside a sleek hospital building in the heart of the city. Marcus adjusted his jacket nervously while Chloe clutched his hand, her eyes wide with both excitement and uncertainty. "Are you ready, kiddo?" Marcus asked, looking down at her. Chloe nodded, gripping his hand tighter. "Do you think he'll remember me, Dad?" "I think he'll never forget you," Marcus said with a reassuring smile. Inside, they were greeted by Catherine Gray, a graceful woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a warm smile. "You must be Chloe," she said, crouching down to Chloe's level. "We've heard so much about you." Chloe blushed and smiled shyly. "Hi," she said softly. Catherine stood and turned to Marcus. "Thank you for coming. It means so much to us." She led them down a quiet hallway to a private room. As they entered, Chloe's eyes were immediately drawn to the man sitting in the hospital bed. He looked different from the man she had met in the park. His beard was neatly trimmed, his hair combed, and he wore a crisp hospital gown. But his eyes, the same gentle blue, lit up when he saw her. "Chloe," he said, his voice filled with warmth. "You came." Chloe stepped closer, a big smile spreading across her face. "Hi, Jonathan. Are you feeling better?" Jonathan chuckled softly. "Much better, thanks to you." Catherine placed a hand on Jonathan's shoulder. "Jonathan, this is Marcus, Chloe's father." Marcus extended a hand and Jonathan shook it firmly. "It's good to meet you," Jonathan said. "Your daughter, she's incredible. What she did for me I can't even put into words." Marcus glanced at Chloe, pride swelling in his chest. "She's got a big heart," he said simply. As Chloe climbed into the chair next to Jonathan's bed, he leaned forward slightly, his eyes filled with gratitude. "When I was sitting on that bench, I felt invisible, like the world had forgotten about me. But then you came along, Chloe, and you reminded me that there's kindness in the world. Your note, it made me remember things I thought I'd lost forever." "What did you remember?" Chloe asked, her voice tinged with wonder. Jonathan smiled, his eyes glistening. "I remembered my family, my parents, my sister, my home. I remembered who I am." Catherine stepped forward, her voice soft. "We didn't know if we'd ever see him again. But because of you, Chloe, we have him back. You gave us our son." Chloe's eyes grew wide. "I didn't know a sandwich could do that," she said innocently. Everyone laughed, the tension in the room breaking into warmth and joy. Jonathan reached for Chloe's hand, holding it gently. "It wasn't just the sandwich, Chloe. It was your kindness. That's something the world needs more of." As the visit continued, Chloe chatted with Jonathan about her drawings, her school, and how much she loved peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Marcus watched from the corner of the room, marveling at how naturally Chloe connected with Jonathan and his family. Before they left, Catherine pulled Marcus aside. "We've been discussing ways to give back," she said. "Jonathan's experience has inspired us to start a foundation to help people facing homelessness and mental health struggles. We'd like to name it after Chloe, if you'll allow it, the Chloe Gray Kindness Foundation." Marcus was stunned. "That's an incredible idea. I'll need to talk to Chloe about it, but I think she'd love that." As they left the hospital that day, Chloe skipped ahead, her curls bouncing as she hummed a cheerful tune. Marcus walked behind her, his heart full. She didn't know it yet, but her small act of kindness was about to change not just one life, but countless others. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity as the foundation began to take shape. Marcus and Chloe worked closely with the Grays to plan the first project, setting up kindness hubs in local parks, places where people in need could find food, support, and resources. Chloe was named the foundation's official kindness ambassador, a title she wore with pride. She helped design the logo, a heart surrounded by rays of light, and even came up with the idea to include handwritten notes with every meal distributed at the hubs. "Everyone needs a little reminder that someone cares," Chloe explained, her face serious as she worked on a stack of colorful cards. Marcus marveled at her determination. She poured her energy into the project with a focus and passion that belied her young age. Finally, the day came for the launch of the first kindness hub. The park where it all began was transformed into a bustling center of activity. Brightly colored tents dotted the landscape, tables were laden with sandwiches and snacks, and volunteers buzzed about, handing out supplies and chatting with visitors. Chloe, dressed in her yellow ambassador shirt, stood at the entrance with Jonathan, greeting everyone with a smile. "Welcome to the Kindness Hub," she said cheerfully to each guest. As Marcus watched from a distance, his chest swelled with pride. This was his daughter's moment, and she was shining brighter than ever. Jonathan approached him, holding a plate of sandwiches. "You've got an amazing kid, Marcus," he said, his voice filled with admiration. She's not just helping people, she's inspiring them. Marcus nodded, his throat tight with emotion. She's got a big heart, always has. Toward the end of the day, Jonathan stood on a small stage and addressed the crowd. This foundation started with one small act of kindness, he said, his voice carrying across the park. Chloe didn't just give me food, she gave me hope. And now we're here to pass that hope on to others. Let this be a reminder to all of us that even the smallest gestures can create ripples that change lives. The crowd erupted into applause, and Chloe beamed as Jonathan gestured for her to join him on stage. She stepped up, waving shyly to the crowd. Thank you everyone for being here, Chloe said, her small voice steady and confident. Kindness is for everyone, and it doesn't matter how big or small it is. You never know how much it can mean to someone. As the applause grew louder, Marcus felt a tear slip down his cheek. His little girl had done something incredible, something far bigger than he could have ever imagined. That night, as they walked home hand in hand, Chloe looked up at him, her eyes sparkling. Dad, do you think we'll make more kindness hubs in other places? Marcus smiled, squeezing her hand. I think this is just the beginning, Chloe. The world needs more kindness, and I think we're just getting started. The park where Chloe first met Jonathan had become a beacon of hope. The Kindness Hub, a colorful and welcoming space, attracted people from all walks of life. Those in need, volunteers, and even curious onlookers who wanted to learn more about the Chloe Gray Kindness Foundation. Every sandwich handed out, every warm smile exchanged felt like a small victory. But this was only the beginning. Back in their small neighborhood, Marcus and Chloe began to notice a change. People who had once walked past each other with little more than a nod were now stopping to chat, sharing stories about how they'd helped at the Kindness Hub or how they'd been inspired by Chloe's story. Mrs. Jenkins, the elderly widow from down the hall who rarely ventured outside, knocked on their door one evening, holding a tray of cookies. I've been hearing all about the Kindness Hub, she said, her voice shaky but warm. I thought I could bake something for the volunteers. Chloe's eyes lit up. Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins. That's such a nice idea. At the local grocery store, Mr. Patel, the owner, stopped Marcus as he picked up a loaf of bread. You know, your little girl is something special, he said with a smile. I'd like to donate some food for the hub. Just let me know what you need. Marcus was stunned. A community that had once felt disjointed was now coming together, united by Chloe's simple act of kindness. One evening, during a video call with Catherine and Edward Gray, Chloe shared a new idea. What if we made more kindness hubs in other parks, she suggested, her face glowing with excitement. Then more people could get help, not just here. Catherine smiled warmly. That's exactly what we were thinking, Chloe. We've already started reaching out to contacts in nearby cities. People are excited to help. Edward nodded. We've got interest from Chicago, Los Angeles, and even Miami. Everyone wants to know how they can be part of this movement. Chloe's eyes widened. Really? That's amazing. Marcus, sitting beside her, couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. How can we help with all of this? He asked. Well, Catherine began, we want Chloe to continue being the face of the foundation. Her story is what inspires people. And Marcus, we'd love for you to help oversee the expansion here in your city. Marcus hesitated, feeling the weight of the responsibility. That's a lot to take on, he said thoughtfully. It is, Edward agreed, but you've already done so much. We'll provide the resources and support. You just keep doing what you're doing. Marcus glanced at Chloe, who was beaming with excitement. Her enthusiasm was contagious, and he knew he couldn't let her down. All right, he said finally. Let's do it. Not everyone in the neighborhood had been supportive of the Kindness Hub at first. Some had whispered behind closed doors, wondering if it was just a publicity stunt or a passing trend. But as time went on, even the skeptics began to see the impact. Mrs. Peterson, the self-appointed neighborhood watch captain who had once been vocal about keeping the park safe from vagrants, approached Marcus and Chloe one day. I owe you both an apology, she said, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. I didn't understand what you were trying to do, but I see it now. You've made our community better, and I'd like to help. Chloe smiled up at her. Thank you, Mrs. Peterson. We'd love to have you help us. Meanwhile, Jonathan continued to heal. He spent time volunteering at the Kindness Hub, sharing his story with anyone who would listen. "I was lost," he told a group of volunteers one afternoon, "not just physically but emotionally. I didn't think anyone cared about me anymore. But then Chloe showed me kindness, and it changed everything." Chloe, who had been helping to pack sandwiches nearby, turned to him with a big grin. "I'm glad I met you, Jonathan." Jonathan laughed. "I'm glad I met you too, Chloe." Within weeks, the Kindness Hubs expanded to nearby cities, each one modeled after the original. Volunteers wore bright yellow shirts with the foundation's logo, and every meal included a handwritten note, just like the one Chloe had given Jonathan. "Remember, you are not alone," one note read. "Kindness makes the world brighter," said another. These small messages, written by volunteers of all ages, became the hallmark of the Kindness Hubs. People began sharing photos of the notes on social media, tagging the foundation and spreading the message even further. One day, as Marcus scrolled through his phone, he came across a post from a woman in Chicago. She had shared a picture of her son holding one of the notes. The caption read, "My little boy and I were struggling, but this reminded us that we're not forgotten. Thank you, Chloe Gray Foundation." Marcus showed the post to Chloe, who gasped in delight. "Dad, it's working," she said. "We're helping people." Marcus ruffled her curls, his heart swelling with pride. "Yes, we are, kiddo, and it's all because of you." The Kindness Hubs sparked a ripple effect that no one had anticipated. Inspired by Chloe's story, schools started organizing kindness drives, where students collected food and supplies for the hubs. Local businesses began donating regularly, and even city officials took notice, praising the foundation for its impact on the community. One evening, as Marcus and Chloe walked home from the park, she looked up at him, her eyes shining with excitement. "Dad, do you think we could make kindness hubs all over the world someday?" Marcus smiled, squeezing her hand. "I think if anyone can do it, it's you, Chloe. This is just the beginning." As they walked under the soft glow of streetlights, Marcus couldn't help but marvel at how far they had come. What had started as a single sandwich had grown into something far bigger, a movement fueled by kindness and compassion. And Chloe, with her big heart and boundless optimism, was at the center of it all. Thanksgiving arrived on a chilly autumn morning, and the city buzzed with anticipation. The Chloe Gray Kindness Foundation was hosting its first major event, a community Thanksgiving dinner at the original Kindness Hub in the park where everything began. The air was crisp, the leaves crunched underfoot, and the scent of roasted turkey and warm pies wafted through the air. Chloe woke up earlier than usual, her excitement bubbling over. She tugged on her bright yellow Kindness Ambassador shirt and ran into the kitchen where Marcus was preparing their contributions for the feast. "Dad, do you think a lot of people will come today?" she asked, her voice brimming with enthusiasm. Marcus smiled at her as he carefully packed a tray of freshly baked rolls. "I think there'll be more people than you can imagine, Chloe. Everyone's excited to be part of this." By the time they arrived at the park, it was already bustling with activity. Rows of long tables had been set up under colorful tents. Volunteers moved quickly, setting plates, arranging decorations, and preparing to serve the guests. The park, which had once been just a quiet corner of the city, now felt alive with energy and purpose. Chloe dashed to the tables where handwritten notes were being placed beside each plate. She had written dozens of them herself the night before, each one with a message of hope and encouragement. She carefully read one aloud as she placed it on a table. "You are loved, and the world is brighter because of you." As the event began, people from all walks of life started to arrive. There were families with young children, elderly neighbors, and individuals who had been touched by the foundation's work. Some came for the meal, others to volunteer, and many just to experience the sense of connection that the foundation had brought to their community. Chloe stood near the entrance with Jonathan, greeting each guest with her trademark smile. "Welcome to the Kindness Dinner," she said cheerfully to an elderly man who walked in, leaning on a cane. "Thank you, young lady," he replied with a warm chuckle. "It's been years since I've had a Thanksgiving dinner like this." Jonathan leaned down to Chloe's level. "You know, you're the reason all of this is happening," he said softly. "Look around. Every smile here started with your kindness." Chloe beamed, her cheeks glowing pink in the crisp air. "It's not just me. Everyone here is helping too." As the guests settled at the tables, laughter and chatter filled the air. Plates piled high with turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, and cranberry sauce made their way to every seat, and the warmth of the food was matched only by the warmth of the company. Before the meal began, Edward Gray stood up and tapped a glass with his fork, the soft ringing silencing the crowd. "If I could have everyone's attention," he began, his voice steady and clear, "I'd like to say a few words." All eyes turned to Edward as he glanced at Chloe, sitting at the front table with Marcus. "This foundation began with one small act of kindness," he said. "Chloe didn't know what her sandwich would lead to. She just saw someone in need and decided to help. That single moment changed my family's life forever, and it's changed the lives of countless others since." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "Let this be a reminder to all of us that kindness is powerful. It doesn't have to be big or grand. It just has to come from the heart. And that's what Chloe showed us." Jonathan stood up then, raising his glass. "To Chloe," he said, his voice carrying across the tables, "for reminding us all that even the smallest gestures can spark something extraordinary." The crowd erupted into applause, and Chloe, shy but proud, waved at everyone. "Thank you," she called out, her voice full of gratitude. As the meal continued, Marcus found himself reflecting on how far they had come. He looked around the tables, watching strangers laughing together, families sharing stories, and people who had once felt invisible now sitting among friends. Chloe darted from table to table, chatting with guests and checking to make sure everyone had enough to eat. She spent extra time with the children, making them laugh and handing out extra rolls with a grin. Her energy was infectious, and Marcus couldn't help but marvel at her ability to bring people together. "Your daughter is remarkable," said Mrs. Jenkins, who had baked dozens of pies for the event. "She's done something truly special here." Marcus nodded, his heart swelling with pride. "She's always had a big heart, but I never imagined it would lead to something like this." Toward the end of the evening, Chloe spotted a familiar face sitting quietly at one of the tables. It was Thomas, now Jonathan, watching the crowd with a soft smile. Chloe walked over and sat down beside him. "Hi, Thomas," she said, still calling him by the name she'd first known him by. "Are you having fun?" Jonathan chuckled. "I am, Chloe. And you know what? I've been thinking about how much has changed since the day we met. You've not only changed my life, you've given me a purpose." Chloe tilted her head curiously. "What do you mean?" "I mean that helping people, being part of this foundation, it's given me something to look forward to. It's reminded me of what's important," Jonathan explained. "And I owe all of that to you." Chloe smiled, her small hand resting on his. "I'm glad you're happy, Thomas." As the event wound down, Edward approached Marcus and Chloe. "Tonight has been incredible," he said. "And this is just the beginning. We're already planning the next kindness hubs in other cities. Chloe's story is inspiring people far and wide." Chloe's eyes sparkled. "Do you think we can do this everywhere, Mr. Edward?" "I think we can, Chloe," Edward replied, his smile wide. "With you leading the way, anything is possible." That night, as Marcus and Chloe walked home under the starry sky, Chloe's steps slowed. "Dad," she said thoughtfully, "do you think people will keep being kind, even when the kindness hubs aren't there?" Marcus knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Sweetheart, kindness isn't just about the hubs. It's something you carry with you, something you share every day, and because of you, people are remembering that." Chloe smiled, wrapping her arms around her father in a tight hug. "I'm glad we helped Thomas," she said softly. "And I'm glad we can help more people too." Marcus kissed the top of her head. "Me too, Chloe. Me too." As they walked the rest of the way home, the quiet hum of the city surrounded them. Chloe's heart was full, knowing that her small act of kindness had grown into something far bigger than she could have ever imagined, a legacy of hope, love, and compassion. Since the Thanksgiving dinner, the Chloe Gray Kindness Foundation had continued to grow at an incredible pace. With hubs opening in cities like Chicago, Los Angeles, and Miami, each new location brought more stories of lives touched by the simple act of care. Volunteers shared their own stories of how Chloe's message had inspired them. In a video sent from the Miami hub, a woman stood in front of a group of volunteers, holding up a note she'd received with her meal. "You are stronger than you think." "This note," the woman said, her voice breaking, "reminded me that I'm not invisible, that someone cares, and because of that, I'm volunteering here today to pass that kindness on." Chloe watched the video at the kindness hub in her neighborhood, her wide eyes sparkling with joy. "Dad, look, they're helping people just like we are." Marcus ruffled her curls. "See? Your kindness is like a stone in a pond. The ripples just keep going." But it wasn't always easy. Not everyone welcomed the Foundation's efforts. Some questioned whether the hubs were a sustainable solution, while others doubted the impact of such a simple concept. Marcus often found himself navigating difficult conversations, but Chloe always seemed to handle the skepticism with grace. One afternoon, during a meeting with a group of local business owners, a skeptical man raised his hand. "What makes you think a sandwich and a kind word can really change someone's life?" he asked bluntly. Chloe, sitting beside her father, looked at the man with a calm, steady gaze. "It's not just the sandwich," she said, her small voice filling the room. "It's showing people that someone cares about them, that they matter, and when someone feels like they matter, they can start to believe in themselves again." The room fell silent for a moment before another business owner spoke up. "She's right," the woman said. "Sometimes it's the smallest things that make the biggest difference." After the meeting, Marcus placed a hand on Chloe's shoulder. "I don't know how you do it," he said with a grin. "You've got a way of making people see things differently." Chloe shrugged, smiling shyly. "I just tell them what I feel." A few weeks later, Chloe and Marcus received an invitation from Catherine and Edward Gray to visit one of the new kindness hubs in New York City. Chloe was thrilled at the idea of seeing Jonathan again, and Marcus was eager to see how the Foundation's work was taking shape in other cities. The hub in New York was massive compared to their small neighborhood park. Dozens of volunteers in yellow shirts buzzed around, handing out meals, organizing donations, and chatting with visitors. Chloe stood in awe as Catherine greeted her with open arms. "Welcome to the newest kindness hub," Catherine exclaimed, "and the busiest one yet." Jonathan, now fully recovered and actively involved in the Foundation, walked up to Chloe with a wide smile. "What do you think, Chloe?" he asked. "Does it feel like we're making a difference?" Chloe looked around at the bustling hub, at the smiling faces of both volunteers and guests. "It feels like everyone's happy," she said simply. "That's what matters." Jonathan knelt beside her. "It all started because of you, Chloe. Don't ever forget that." As the months went on, Chloe continued to dream big. One evening, as she and Marcus sat on the couch, she pulled out a notebook filled with colorful drawings and ideas for future kindness hubs. "Dad, what if we had a kindness hub in every country?" she asked, her eyes shining. "We could help people all over the world." Marcus laughed softly, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "That's a big dream, Chloe, but I believe you can make it happen." "Really?" Chloe asked, tilting her head to look up at him. "Really," Marcus said, kissing her forehead. "You've already shown that one small act of kindness can change everything. Imagine what you could do with a whole world of kindness." One quiet evening, Marcus tucked Chloe into bed as the city lights twinkled outside their window. Sitting on the edge of her bed, he stroked her curls and smiled down at her. "Chloe," he said softly, "do you know how proud I am of you?" Chloe yawned, her eyelids growing heavy. "Why, Dad?" "Because you've shown the world that even the smallest act of kindness can create something big," Marcus said. "You've made the world a better place just by being you." Chloe smiled sleepily. "I just wanted to help Thomas," she murmured. "And look what that turned into," Marcus replied. "You're helping so many people now." As Chloe drifted off to sleep, Marcus stayed by her side for a moment longer, his heart full. He thought about how far they'd come, from a simple sandwich in the park to a movement that was spreading across the country. He knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but with Chloe leading the way, anything seemed possible. The story of Chloe Gray's kindness continued to inspire people far and wide. More kindness hubs were built, more communities came together, and more lives were touched. And through it all, Chloe remained the same bright, compassionate girl who had simply seen someone in need and decided to help. As Marcus watched his daughter grow, he knew that her light would only shine brighter with time. She was living proof that kindness could change the world. one small act at a time. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to join us for more stories of bravery, inspiration, and the human spirit. Together we can celebrate the heroes, both two- and four-legged, who remind us what it means to never give up.